She thought he didn't notice. The limp, the exhaustion. The way his maid disappeared every Wednesday night carrying a bag she could barely lift. But the Mafia boss noticed everything. And when he finally followed her into the shadows, what he discovered didn't just explain her desperation. It revealed the enemy who'd been destroying him from the inside. Giovanni Russo didn't get to the top of New York's shipping empire by missing details. The way a man shifted his eyes during negotiations. The tremor in a competitor's handshake. The smallest crack in a perfectly constructed lie. These things told him everything he needed to know about trust, loyalty, and when someone was about to betray him. So when Clara Hayes limped past his office window at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night, he noticed. She shouldn't have even been there. The housekeeping staff finished at 6. The Port Authority warehouse on the Hudson was locked down by 8, with only his security team and the overnight cargo crew remaining. Yet there she was, his quiet, efficient maid who'd worked in his penthouse for 8 months, hobbling across the floodlit loading dock with a bulging black duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Giovanni set down his whiskey glass and moved to the window. 2 stories below, Clara's shadow stretched long across the wet concrete. It had rained earlier, and the port smelled like diesel fuel and river water. She was wearing jeans and a dark hoodie instead of her usual crisp uniform, and the bag looked heavy enough to throw off her balance. She was heading toward the east gate, the employee exit, the one that led to the city bus stop 3 blocks away. His phone buzzed. Marco, his head of security. "Boss, you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it," Giovanni said quietly. "Don't approach. Just watch." Through the window, he tracked Clara's uneven gait. She favored her left leg badly, almost dragging it. But what caught his attention wasn't the injury, it was the way she kept glancing over her shoulder. Nervous, afraid of being seen. Then she stopped. One of his dock supervisors, Tommy Delgado, stepped out from behind a shipping container. Clara's whole body went rigid. Even from this distance, Giovanni could see the fear flash across her face before she forced a smile and waved. Tommy waved back, said something Giovanni couldn't hear, then continued his rounds. The moment Tommy disappeared, Clara's smile vanished. She clutched the duffel bag tighter and moved faster, despite the obvious pain it caused her. Giovanni's jaw tightened. 8 months. She'd worked for him for 8 months. Never late. Never asked questions. Never gave him a reason to look twice. She cleaned his penthouse, prepared his coffee exactly how he liked it, and had a strange habit of leaving sticky notes with weather updates on his briefcase. Thunderstorms at 3 p.m. Bring the Lexus, not the Maserati. He'd kept every single note, though he'd never admit why. Now she was sneaking through his warehouse at midnight with a mysterious injury and a heavy bag, looking guilty as hell. The rational part of his brain said this was simple. She was stealing. Maybe skimming from petty cash, maybe involved with one of the dock crews who moved more than just legal cargo. He should have Marco grab her, search the bag, and fire her before the hour was up. But Giovanni hadn't survived 15 years in the shipping business and the shadowy world that operated within it by jumping to conclusions. He pulled out his phone and texted Marco, "Follow her. Don't let her see you. I want to know where she goes, who she meets, and what's in that bag."
No confrontación.
3 dots appeared. Then, copy that. Giovanni watched until Clara disappeared through the east gate, her limp growing worse with every step. She stopped once, bracing herself against the chain-link fence, and even from 2 stories up, he could see her wince in pain. Something twisted in his chest. An unfamiliar sensation.
Concern? No.
Giovanni Russo didn't do concern for employees. This was purely business. If Clara was compromised, if she was working with someone who posed a threat to his operation, he needed to know. He downed the rest of his whiskey and grabbed his coat. "Where are you going?" his brother Vincent asked, looking up from a stack of shipping manifests spread across the conference table. Vincent handled the legitimate side of Russo shipping, the contracts, the paperwork, the board meetings. Giovanni handled everything else. Out. It's almost midnight. And Giovanni raised an eyebrow. Vincent sighed. You've got the International Consortium call at 8 a.m. You need sleep, not whatever this is. I'll be fine. Gio. I said I'll be fine. Giovanni's tone left no room for argument. He softened slightly. Go home, Vin. Check on Maria and the kids. Vincent studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Don't do anything stupid. Stupidity is for amateurs. 20 minutes later, Giovanni sat in his blacked-out Lexus 4 cars behind the city bus Clara had boarded. Marco was already on the bus, dressed in construction gear, invisible among the late-shift workers heading home. The bus crawled through Lower Manhattan, stopping every few blocks. Clara never looked up from her phone, but her hand stayed clenched around that duffel bag like her life depended on it. Giovanni's phone buzzed. Marco again. She's getting off at South Street, near the old fish market. South Street. That part of the waterfront had been his father's territory 20 years ago, before the legitimate business took over. Now it was mostly abandoned warehouses and the kind of bars where people minded their own business. The bus stopped. Clara climbed off, moving slowly, painfully. Giovanni hung back, watching through tinted windows as she limped down a side street between two condemned buildings. Then two men stepped out of the shadows. Giovanni's hand moved to the pistol in his glove compartment. Old habits, but he stopped when he saw Clara's reaction. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She walked right up to them, set down the duffel bag, and unzipped it. Even from a distance, Giovanni could see the cash. Stacks of it. One of the men, tall, muscular, dockworker build, took the money and counted it quickly. The other disappeared into the warehouse and emerged seconds later with someone else. A young man, maybe 25, stumbling and weak. His shirt was soaked with blood. Clara rushed to him, wrapping her arms around him despite his weight, nearly knocking her over. She was crying now. Giovanni could tell by the way her shoulders shook.
The injured man said something.
Clara nodded, pulled bandages from her coat pocket, and began wrapping his midsection right there in the alley while the two dock workers watched. Giovanni's mind raced, piecing it together. The limp wasn't hers. She'd injured herself carrying that bag. The money, the blood, the secretive meeting. This wasn't theft. This was desperation. His phone lit up with a message from Marco. Boss, those two men, they're on our watch list. Connected to the Bianchi smuggling operation. The kid's name is Luca Hayes. He's her brother. Giovanni stared at the screen, then back at the alley where Clara was now helping her brother walk, supporting most of his weight, while the smugglers melted back into the shadows. Clara Hayes wasn't stealing from him. She was trying to save someone. And somehow, that made everything infinitely more complicated. Giovanni didn't go home that night. Instead, he sat in his office at the warehouse, 3 empty espresso cups on his desk, watching Marco's surveillance footage on repeat. The grainy video showed Clara meeting the same 2 men at South Street for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. Always Wednesday nights. Always with cash. Always checking on her brother. How much has she given them? Giovanni asked. Marco pulled up a spreadsheet on his tablet. Based on the bag sizes and our estimates, somewhere between 15 and 20,000 over the last 2 months. Maybe more before we started tracking.
$22,000.
On a maid's salary of $35,000 a year. Where's she getting the money? Second job at a diner in Queens. Waitressing 6 nights a week. She also sold her car last month. Marco scrolled through bank records that Giovanni definitely shouldn't have had access to. Maxed out 2 credit cards. Borrowed $5,000 from a payday loan place in Brooklyn at 30% interest. Giovanni's expression darkened. She's destroying herself, financially. For a guy who got himself into this mess, Marco added. You want me to keep digging into the brother? Everything. I want to know what he ate for breakfast 3 months ago. By dawn, Giovanni had the full picture, and it was worse than he'd thought. Luca Hayes, 24 years old, former NYU dropout with a philosophy degree and $60,000 in student debt. No criminal record, but plenty of bad judgment. 6 months ago, He'd taken a job with a private freight company that promised $1,500 a week cash for overnight dock work. No questions asked. The company was a front for Vincenzo Bianchi's smuggling operation. Luca had lasted 3 weeks before a container load went wrong. Someone had tipped off customs, agents had swarmed the dock, and in the chaos, Luca had been crushed between 2 shipping containers trying to run. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, a shattered hip. The kind of injuries that required surgery and months of recovery. Bianchi's people had dumped him at a clinic in New Jersey with fake papers and a message. The medical bills were his problem, and he still owed them for the lost merchandise from the botched job. $50,000 plus interest. Pay up or disappear. Clara had been paying ever since. She's been keeping him hidden in that warehouse on South Street, Marco continued, showing Giovanni photos from overnight surveillance. The smugglers check on him twice a week. They're not killing him because Clara keeps paying, but the debt keeps growing. She'll never get out from under it. Giovanni stared at a photo of Clara sleeping on a cot next to her brother, her work uniform still on, exhausted from her double shift. Her face looked 10 years older than her 28 years. The smugglers, Giovanni said carefully. They're using my containers. It wasn't a question.
Marco nodded grimly.
We've suspected for weeks that someone's been piggybacking on our legitimate shipments. Small stuff, electronics, prescription drugs, nothing that would trigger a full inspection. But it's been screwing with our customs clearances. 3 delayed shipments last month alone. And Bianchi. He's funding a whole operation. We intercepted some financial transfers between his logistics company and shell accounts tied to those dock workers. He's using our routes to move contraband while making us look sloppy to the consortium. Giovanni's hands curled into fists. Vincenzo Bianchi had been a thorn in his side for 5 years, always a step behind, always trying to undercut Russo Shipping's contracts, always whispering poison to the International Shipping Consortium about Giovanni's questionable business practices. The irony was Giovanni had gone completely legitimate 3 years ago. His father's old empire had dealt in everything from weapons to stolen art, but Giovanni had dismantled it piece by piece, building something clean, something that could last. And now Bianchi was using his own network to move dirty cargo while framing him as incompetent. Pull the footage from our warehouse cameras for the last 3 months, Giovanni ordered. I want to see everyone Clara talked to every time she came through that gate. If she's been accessing areas she shouldn't. Boss, Marco hesitated. I already checked. She never went near the cargo zones. Never touched anything except the executive offices she's assigned to clean. Whatever her brother did, she's not part of the smuggling. Then why was she at my warehouse last night? Marco pulled up a new video. This one showed Clara 2 weeks ago, during her normal shift, standing outside Giovanni's office door. She'd raised her hand to knock 3 times but never did. Each time, she'd pulled back, pressed her forehead against the wall, then walked away. She was going to tell you, Marco said quietly. She wanted to ask for help, but she chickened out. Giovanni watched the footage again. The defeat in Clara's posture.
The shame.
The fear. She'd been suffering alone for months, trapped in an impossible situation, and she'd been too afraid to tell him.
Why?
Because he was Giovanni Russo, the cold, calculating shipping magnate who fired people for being 5 minutes late. The man whose reputation was built on ruthlessness and control. She thought he wouldn't care. The realization bothered him more than it should have. What do you want to do? Marco asked. We could pay off the debt. 50 grand is nothing to us. Get her brother out. Send them both somewhere safe.
No. No.
Giovanni stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Paying the debt solves Clara's problem. It doesn't solve mine. Bianchi is using my infrastructure to run his operation, which means he's got people inside my company. I need to know who, and I need leverage. So we use the girl? We use the situation. Giovanni picked up his phone. Schedule a meeting with Clara. Tell her I need to discuss a security matter. And Marco. Yeah, boss. Make sure she knows she's not in trouble. Not yet.
Marco Smirquez.
You're going soft. I'm being strategic. There's a difference. But as Giovanni left his office, passing by Clara's sticky note on his desk, cold front coming. Wear the wool coat, he wondered if Marco might be right. Clara knew she was finished the moment she saw the email. Report to Mr. Russo's office at 9 a.m. Security matter. Her hands trembled as she read it again on the bus ride to work. Security matter. That could only mean one thing, they knew. Somehow, Giovanni Russo had found out about the warehouse visits, about Luca, about everything. She thought about running, getting her brother, and disappearing into some small town where men like Russo and Bianchi couldn't find them. But Luca could barely walk, and she had $43 in her checking account. There was nowhere to run. So at 8:55 a.m., Clara stood outside Giovanni's office door, wearing her cleaning uniform and trying to keep her breathing steady. The same door she'd almost knocked on 2 weeks ago, desperate enough to beg for help. She'd chickened out then. Now she wouldn't have a choice. Marco opened the door. He's ready for you. The office was exactly as she'd left it yesterday. Immaculate mahogany desk, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the port, the faint smell of expensive cologne and coffee. Giovanni stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, watching cargo ships being loaded in the distance. Sit down, Clara.
His voice was calm. Too calm.
Clara had learned that the quieter Giovanni Russo spoke, the more dangerous he became. She'd seen him fire 3 executives last month without raising his voice once. She sat, gripping the armrests to stop her hands from shaking. Giovanni turned around. His dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was slightly loosened, his jaw shadowed with stubble. But his gaze was sharp as ever. How long have you been paying for someone else's mistakes? Clara's breath caught. Not why are you stealing or you're fired. Just that simple, devastating question that proved he knew everything. I don't know what you... Don't, Giovanni's voice cut through her excuse like a blade. I know about your brother. I know about the warehouse on South Street. I know about the men you've been giving money to every Wednesday night for the past 2 months. Maybe longer. Clara's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. I never touched anything in this building. I never stole from you. I swear. I know that too. She blinked. What? Giovanni moved to his desk, pulling up something on his computer and turning the screen toward her. Security footage. Her, standing outside this very office, hand raised to knock, pulling away in defeat. You wanted to tell me, he said. Why didn't you? Clara stared at her own image on the screen, small, scared, ashamed. Because I knew what you'd say. That it's not your problem. That I should have been smarter. That people like me don't matter to people like you. Something flickered in Giovanni's expression. Is that what you think of me? I think you're a businessman, Mr. Russo. You make decisions based on profit and loss. My brother's dead is a loss. I'm just the maid, her voice cracked.
I'm replaceable.
Silence filled the office. Giovanni sat down across from her, leaning back in his chair, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. How long have you been paying for someone else's mistakes? He asked again, softer this time. Clara met his eyes. She was going to lose everything anyway. Might as well tell the truth. Until it's paid in full. Even though your brother got himself into this mess? Even though he chose to work for criminals? He's 24 years old. He made a stupid mistake because he was drowning in debt and someone offered him easy money. Clara's voice grew stronger. He didn't know what he was walking into. And when it went wrong, those men left him to die. So yes, Mr. Russo, I'll keep paying until it's done, because he's my brother and that's what family does. Giovanni was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not the cold, corporate smile she'd seen him use in meetings. Something genuine. You're destroying yourself for him. That's my choice. Even if it means working 3 jobs, maxing out credit cards, selling everything you own. Clara's eyes widened. How do you? I know everything that happens in my world, Clara. Including when one of my employees is in trouble. He stood, walking to the window again. Those men you're paying, they work for Vincenzo Bianchi. Do you know who that is?
No.
He's my competitor. He's been using my shipping containers to smuggle contraband for months, making my company look incompetent to our international partners. Your brother's debt isn't just a personal problem. It's connected to a much larger operation that's been costing me millions. Clara felt the floor drop out from under her. I didn't know. I swear, I had no idea. I believe you, Giovanni turned back to her. But now I have a decision to make. Your brother's debt ties you to my enemy's operation. That makes you a liability. Please, Clara stood, her pride dissolving into desperation. Please don't hurt him. He's barely alive as it is. I'll work for free. I'll do anything. Sit down. She's Saturday. Giovanni returned to his desk, his fingers steepled under his chin. I'm not going to hurt your brother. And you're not fired. Clara's heart hammered. I don't understand. Neither do I entirely. Giovanni's eyes held hers. But what I do understand is this. You've been loyal, hardworking, and discreet for 8 months. You've never asked for special treatment. You've never complained. And when your family needed you, you sacrificed everything without hesitation. He opened a drawer and pulled out the stack of sticky notes she'd left him. Weather updates, meeting reminders, small kindnesses she'd never thought he noticed. Loyalty is rare in my world, Clara. Genuine loyalty, not the kind bought with money or fear. He set the notes down carefully. So, I'm going to give you something I rarely give anyone a chance. Go back to work. Say nothing about this conversation. And trust that I'll handle this situation my way. But the debt is no longer your concern. Do you understand? Clara wanted to argue, to demand answers, to know what he meant by handle this situation, but something in Giovanni's expression told her this conversation was over. She stood on shaking legs. Thank you, Mr. Russo. Clara. She paused at the door. Stop destroying yourself for people who don't deserve it. As she left, Giovanni turned back to his computer, pulling up shipping manifests and financial records. The pieces were falling into place. Bianchi's smugglers. His disrupted shipments. Clara's impossible debt. It was all connected. And Giovanni Russo always won when he could see the whole board. Giovanni gave Marco 72 hours to map out Bianchi's entire operation. What he got back was worse than he'd imagined. It's brilliant, actually, Marco said, spreading photographs and documents across the conference table. It was 2 a.m., and they were alone in the office, just how Giovanni preferred it when discussing things that couldn't be recorded. Bianchi's not running a separate smuggling ring. He's parasiting off yours. Giovanni studied the evidence. Shipping manifests with altered weight records. Customs declarations that didn't match actual container contents. Timestamps showing his own dock workers signing off on inspections they'd never actually performed. Walk me through it. Marco pointed to a photograph of one of the men Clara had been paying, the tall, muscular one with a tattoo sleeve. This is Derek Santos. He's been working our night shift for 7 months. Before that, he was on Bianchi's payroll at a warehouse in Jersey City. So, Bianchi planted him. Him, and at least 3 others we've identified so far. They get hired through our normal channels. Background checks come back clean because Bianchi's got people inside the temp agencies we use. Once they're in, they wait for shipments from specific clients. Giovanni's jaw tightened. Which clients? The ones paying premium rates for expedited customs clearance. The ones who can't afford delays. Marco pulled up a list on his tablet. Anderson Electronics. Midwest Medical Supply. Pacific Trade Solutions. All legitimate companies with time-sensitive cargo. Bianchi's guys intercept the containers during the overnight inspection process, add their contraband, usually prescription drugs or high-end electronics, then reseal everything. And when customs does random inspections, your client's shipments get flagged. Your company gets blamed for sloppy documentation. Your reputation takes a hit. Marco leaned back. Meanwhile, 90% of the contraband gets through because it's hidden in legitimate cargo under your company's credentials. Bianchi gets rich, you look incompetent, and your clients start wondering if Russo shipping is worth the premium price. Giovanni stood, moving to the window. The port stretched out below him, hundreds of containers stacked like building blocks, each one representing someone's business, someone's livelihood. His father had built this empire with blood and intimidation. Giovanni had spent years making it legitimate, cleaning every dirty corner, until Russo shipping was respected, trusted. And Bianchi was burning it all down from the inside. How much have we lost? Direct losses from delayed shipments and penalty fees? About 4 million over the last 6 months. But the reputational damage? Marco shook his head. We've lost 3 major contracts this quarter. Anderson Electronics is already negotiating with Bianchi's company. If this continues, we're looking at 20, maybe 30 million in lost revenue over the next year. Giovanni's hands curled into fists. Show me Bianchi's financials.
Marco hesitated.
Boss, these records. If anyone finds out how we got them, show me. The documents that appeared on screen had been obtained through methods Giovanni preferred not to think about too carefully. Bank transfers, shell company formations, encrypted communications that Marco's tech team had somehow decrypted. What they revealed made Giovanni's blood run cold. Bianchi wasn't just funding the smuggling operation. He was systematically sabotaging Russo shipping at every level, bribing port inspectors to flag Giovanni's containers for random inspections, paying off union representatives to slow down loading times, even funding anonymous complaints to the International Shipping Consortium about Russo shipping's declining standards. This isn't competition, Giovanni said quietly. This is warfare. It's personal, Marco agreed. Bianchi's been gunning for you since the consortium chose your company over his for the Singapore expansion deal last year. This is revenge. Giovanni studied a photograph of Vincenzo Bianchi, silver-haired, perpetually tanned, always smiling for the cameras at charity galas and business conferences. The kind of man who shook your hand while plotting to stab you in the back. And Clara's brother just happened to get caught in the middle. Wrong place, wrong time. The kid was working the dock the night customs raided. He ran, got crushed, and Bianchi's guys saw an opportunity. String him along with fake medical debt, bleed his sister dry, and if anyone starts investigating the smuggling operation, they've got a convenient scapegoat. Giovanni turned back to the evidence. His mind was already working through scenarios, calculating moves and countermoves like a chess game. Bianchi had been playing this carefully, small incursions, nothing dramatic enough to trigger a full investigation. Death by 1,000 cuts. But he'd made one mistake. He'd involved Clara. What about the debt? Giovanni asked. How much does Luca actually owe for medical treatment? Marco pulled up hospital records. The clinic in Jersey City charged $16,000. Bianchi's people are claiming $50,000 plus interest, but that's all manufactured. They're just keeping the kid on the hook to maintain leverage. So Clara's been paying off a fake debt. Pretty much. And even if she somehow came up with the full amount, they'd just invent new charges. Bianchi needs Luca scared and dependent in case he needs a fall guy. Giovanni was silent for a long moment, his mind working through the implications. This wasn't just about Clara anymore. This was about his company, his reputation, and the legitimate empire he'd spent years building. Bianchi thought he could hide behind shell companies and planted employees, slowly strangling Russo shipping while maintaining plausible deniability. He'd underestimated Giovanni's willingness to fight dirty when necessary. I want complete surveillance on all of Bianchi's planted workers, Giovanni said. Every conversation, every movement, every transaction. I want to know what they eat for breakfast. Already in progress. Pull records on every shipment they've touched for the last 6 months. I want documentation of every piece of contraband, every falsified manifest, every bribe. That'll take time. You have a week, Giovanni turned to face Marco. And I want eyes on Bianchi himself. Where he goes, who he meets, what he's planning next. But Marco. Absolute discretion. If he suspects we're onto him, He'll burn the evidence and disappear.
Marco nodded slowly.
What about the girl? Giovanni thought about Clara, about her determination to save her brother despite impossible odds. About the way she'd looked at him in his office, scared but defiant, ready to sacrifice everything for family. Keep her close. I want her at the mansion, not her apartment. She'll ask questions. Tell her it's for her safety. Tell her we're investigating the men who threatened her brother. Tell her whatever she needs to hear. Giovanni's voice hardened. But keep her away from that warehouse on South Street. If Bianchi's people think she stopped paying, they might panic. And if she refuses, she won't. Giovanni picked up one of Clara's sticky notes from his desk. Heavy rain tonight. The west parking lot floods. Small observations. Quiet care. The kind of attention that came from actually giving a damn. She wanted my help, Giovanni said quietly. Now, she's going to get it, whether she likes it or not. Clara knew something was wrong when Giovanni's driver picked her up from the diner at midnight. Mr. Russo wants you at the estate, the driver said, holding open the door of a black Mercedes. It's important. I have to work in the morning. He's aware. Your things have already been collected from your apartment. Clara's stomach dropped. What? You can't just. Ma'am, please. Mr. Russo was very clear. It's for your safety. 20 minutes later, Clara stood in the foyer of Giovanni's mansion in Alpine, New Jersey, feeling completely out of place. The house was modern and sprawling, all glass and stone overlooking the Hudson River. Her entire apartment could fit in the living room. Giovanni appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a dark sweater and jeans, the most casual she'd ever seen him. Somehow, he looked more dangerous without the suit. You can't kidnap me, Clara said immediately. I didn't kidnap you. I relocated you temporarily. He descended the stairs with the calm confidence of someone who expected to be obeyed. Your brother's situation has become complicated. What does that mean? It means the men you've been paying are more dangerous than you realize. I have reason to believe they're monitoring your apartment, possibly your workplace. Until I've secured your brother's situation, you're safer here. Clara crossed her arms. And I don't get a say in this. You can refuse. Giovanni stopped a few feet away. You can go back to your apartment, back to working 3 jobs, back to meeting criminals in dark alleys. Or you can stay here, where you have security, where you can actually sleep for more than 4 hours a night, and let me handle things. Why are you doing this? Because you asked for my help. Remember? You stood outside my office 3 times trying to knock. His dark eyes held hers. Consider this me answering the door. Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was crushing her. She'd worked the diner shift after cleaning the warehouse offices, and her feet ached so badly she could barely stand. The idea of a safe bed, even for one night, was almost too tempting to resist. Just until Luca's debt is settled, she said finally. Then I'm gone. Of course. Giovanni gestured toward the stairs. Maria will show you to your room. The guest suite was larger than her entire apartment, with a king bed that looked like heaven and windows overlooking the river. Clara collapsed onto the mattress, still wearing her uniform, too tired to care about anything else. She didn't see Giovanni watching from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Over the next 3 days, Clara realized Giovanni's protection came with strings attached. He asked questions. Casual ones at first, about her brother's friends, the clinic where he'd been treated, specific dates when she'd made payments. Clara answered because they seemed innocent enough. But then the questions became more detailed. The taller man you give money to, Santos. Does he ever mention other people? Names, locations? Did your brother ever talk about what was in the containers he was moving? When you pay them, do they give you receipts? Any kind of documentation? Clara sat across from Giovanni in his study on the 4th evening, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. You're investigating them. I'm protecting you. No. She set down the cup. You're using me. You're using my connection to those men to get information about something bigger. Giovanni didn't deny it. He simply leaned back in his chair, studying her with those calculating eyes. Does that bother you? I never asked to be part of whatever this is. I just wanted to save my brother and disappear. That was never going to happen, Clara. Even if you paid every cent they demanded, they would have found new reasons to keep you hooked. Your brother is a loose end in a much larger operation. They would have killed him eventually, and possibly you too. The bluntness of it stole her breath. So what? You're going to kill them first? I'm going to dismantle the organization that's been using my company to move contraband. An organization that coincidentally happens to be the same one holding your brother hostage. Giovanni stood, moving to the window. I'm solving your problem and mine simultaneously. That's called efficiency. That's called using people. He turned to face her. You're right. I am using your connection to track money movements, identify patterns, build a case against the people running this operation. But Clara, they used you first. They saw a desperate woman and bled her dry while threatening her family. At least I'm honest about it. Clara stood, her hands shaking with anger and something else. Fear, maybe, or the crushing realization that she was in far deeper than she'd ever imagined. I want to see my brother. Not yet. That wasn't a request. And this isn't a negotiation. Giovanni's voice hardened. If you show up at that warehouse now, after disappearing for days, Santos and his people will know something's wrong. They'll panic, and panicked criminals do desperate things. Your brother is safer with you here, and them thinking you're still scared and compliant. How long? As long as it takes. Clara moved toward the door, needing to escape the suffocating weight of this conversation, but Giovanni's voice stopped her. I know you hate this. I know you never wanted to be part of my world. His tone softened, just slightly. But you're here now, and I'm offering you something no one else can, a real solution. Not just paying off a debt that was fake from the start, but actually ending the threat.
Permanently.
Clara turned back to him. And what do you get out of it? Giovanni smiled, cold and calculated. I get to destroy a man who's been trying to destroy me. Your brother's freedom is just a convenient side effect. The honesty was almost worse than a lie. At least a lie would have let her pretend Giovanni cared about something other than his vendetta. She left without another word, climbing the stairs to her borrowed room, feeling like a prisoner in a gilded cage. Behind her, Giovanni returned to his desk, pulling up financial records Marco had just sent over. Transaction patterns between Santos's accounts and Bianchi's shell companies. Payment schedules that corresponded exactly with Clara's Wednesday night meetings. She was the perfect tracker, leading them right into the heart of Bianchi's operation. And she had no idea how valuable she really was. Giovanni ignored the small voice in his head that whispered he was no better than the criminals he was hunting. This was business. Nothing more. He'd almost convinced himself it was true. It happened on the 7th night. Clara had spent the day watching Marco's team install new security cameras around the estate, listening to Giovanni take conference calls about shipping routes and customs delays, seeing the way he looked at her, like she was a chess piece he was trying to figure out how to use next. She'd had enough. At 10 p.m., she walked into his study without knocking. Giovanni was at his desk, surrounded by documents and laptop screens, a glass of whiskey beside him. He looked up, surprised but not displeased. You need something? You're using me. Giovanni set down his pen slowly. We've had this conversation. No, we talked around it. Now I'm stating it directly. Clara moved closer to the desk, her fear buried under weeks of exhaustion and anger. Every question you ask, every time you keep me here instead of letting me see Luca, every single thing you've done since that morning in your office, it's all been about your investigation. Not about helping me. Not about protecting my brother. It's about you getting what you need to take down Bianchi. Is that what you think? Giovanni's voice was dangerously quiet. I know it. I'm not stupid, Mr. Russo. I've watched you manipulate people for 8 months. I've seen how you operate. You identified a useful resource, me, and you're exploiting it. That's what you do. That's who you are. Giovanni stood, the movement so sudden it made Clara step back. But she held her ground as he rounded the desk, stopping close enough that she could see the flash of genuine anger in his eyes. You want the truth? Fine, his voice was cold as winter steel. Yes, I'm using your connection to Santos and his people to track money flow. Yes, I'm keeping you here because your presence in that warehouse would compromise my investigation. Yes, everything I've done has been calculated to serve my interests. But let's talk about you, Clara. What about me? You used your entire life to save a man who doesn't deserve it. The words hit her like a physical blow. Clara's breath caught, tears burning her eyes, but Giovanni didn't stop. Your brother made a choice. A stupid, selfish choice to work for criminals because he wanted easy money. When it went wrong, instead of facing consequences, he hid while you destroyed yourself trying to fix his mess.
$22.
3 jobs. Maxed credit cards. You sold everything you owned, worked yourself to exhaustion. And for what? So he could keep hiding in a warehouse, letting you sacrifice everything while he waits for someone else to solve his problems. He's my brother. He's an adult who should have protected you, not the other way around. Giovanni's voice rose for the first time since she'd known him. You talk about me using people? What do you think he's been doing? He's watched you work yourself into the ground for months. Has he ever told you to stop? Has he ever said, Clara, this is too much. I'll figure something else out? Or has he just kept taking your money and your sacrifice like it's owed to him? Clara's hands shook. You don't know anything about my family. I know you're drowning because he pulled you under. Giovanni's expression was hard, merciless. I know loyalty when I see it, and I also know when someone's loyalty is being weaponized against them. Your brother doesn't deserve what you've given him. And deep down, you know that's true. The tears came then, hot and angry. Clara hated that he was right, hated that she'd thought the same thing 100 times in the darkest hours of the night. Hated that Giovanni Russo could see through her so easily. At least I love someone enough to sacrifice for them, she said, her voice breaking. At least I'm not a cold, calculating machine who sees people as assets and problems to be solved. You don't care about me or Luca. You don't care about anyone except yourself and your precious company. Something flickered across Giovanni's face. Hurt, maybe, or recognition. He stepped back, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but somehow more dangerous. You're right. I am cold. I am calculating. I've had to be, to survive in a world that would have destroyed me otherwise. But don't confuse my methods with my motives. He moved to the window, his back to her. I'm keeping you here because those men would kill you if they knew you'd stopped paying. I'm investigating Bianchi because he's using my network to move contraband, which puts everyone who works for me at risk. And yes, Clara, I'm trying to save your brother because despite what you think of me, I don't let innocent people die when I can prevent it. Clara wiped her eyes roughly. Then let me help. Let me see him. Let me do something instead of sitting in this mansion feeling useless.
No.
Why not? Giovanni turned back to her, and for the first time, she saw something raw in his expression. Something almost vulnerable. Because you'll get yourself killed trying to protect him, and I can't, he stopped, seeming to catch himself. I can't have that on my conscience. You stay here. You stay out of the investigation. That's not negotiable. You don't get to control my life. Under this roof, yes I do. Clara moved toward the door, her whole body shaking with fury and grief, and a dozen emotions she couldn't name. I'm not your prisoner. Then leave, Giovanni's voice followed her. Walk out that door, go back to your apartment, go back to meeting Santos in dark alleys. See how long you last. She paused, hand on the doorknob, hating him and hating herself more for knowing he was right. I thought you were different, she said quietly. When you kept those sticky notes, when you noticed I was limping, I thought maybe you actually cared about something other than business. But you're just like everyone else. Just better at hiding it.
Giovanni didn't respond.
Clara left, climbing the stairs to her room, locking the door behind her. Downstairs, Giovanni stood alone in his study, staring at the stack of sticky notes on his desk. Thunderstorms at 3 p.m. Cold front coming. Heavy rain tonight. Small observations from someone who'd cared enough to notice. He poured another whiskey, his hand steady despite the storm in his chest. Clara Hayes was supposed to be a means to an end. a useful connection to Bianchi's operation. So, why did her words cut deeper than they should have? Why did the thought of her leaving make something in him twist uncomfortably? Giovanni drained the glass and returned to his work. There would be time for feelings after he'd won. Giovanni didn't speak to Clara for 3 days after their fight. He left early, returned late, and communicated only through Maria, his housekeeper, when necessary. Clara told herself she didn't care. She was lying. But whatever personal drama existed between them became irrelevant on the 4th morning when Giovanni walked into the breakfast room and said simply, "It's time." Clara looked up from her coffee. Time for what? To end this, he set down a folder on the table. Bianchi's making his move. We're going to let him think he's won. Over the next hour, Giovanni laid out a plan so intricate it made Clara's head spin. He'd spent the last 72 hours constructing an elaborate trap, and every piece was finally in position. "We've created a fake shipment," Marco explained, pulling up documents on his tablet. On paper, it's a high-value cargo container coming from Singapore: electronics, medical equipment, pharmaceutical supplies. Total declared value, $8 million. But it's not real? Clara asked. Oh, the container's real. The cargo inside is real. But it's worthless. Outdated equipment we bought from liquidation sales, generic drugs that cost us pennies. Giovanni's eyes glinted with cold satisfaction. What makes it valuable is the paperwork. He spread documents across the table. Shipping manifests, customs declarations, insurance certificates, all perfectly legitimate on the surface. But woven throughout were subtle red flags designed to attract exactly the wrong kind of attention. "We've made it look like we're trying to hide something," Marco continued. "Weight discrepancies in the documentation. Unusual routing through 3 different ports. Payment from a shell company with vague ownership records. To anyone looking for contraband opportunities, this looks like a smuggler's dream. High-value cargo with sloppy documentation and a shipper who can't afford scrutiny." Clara began to understand. "You want Bianchi's people to think you're moving something illegal." "Exactly." Giovanni leaned back. "We've made sure Santos and his crew know about the shipment. One of our compromised dock workers accidentally left the manifest where they could photograph it. By now, Bianchi knows there's a vulnerable container arriving at our port in 48 hours. What's actually inside?" Clara asked. "Besides the worthless cargo." Giovanni smiled. Not his cold business smile, but something sharper, more predatory.
Bait.
Falsified ledgers showing payments to fictional smuggling contacts. Counterfeit cash marked with traceable serial numbers. Encrypted hard drives with deliberately crackable passwords that lead to more fake evidence. Everything designed to make Bianchi think he stumbled onto documentation of our illegal operations. But why would he want that? "Because information is currency," Giovanni said. "If Bianchi thinks he has proof that Russo shipping is dirty, he can use it to destroy me. Report me to authorities, leak it to the consortium, blackmail me into stepping aside. He'll take the bait because it gives him exactly what he's been trying to achieve, my complete downfall." Marco pulled up a map showing the port layout. "The container arrives tomorrow night. We've arranged for unexpected delays in the inspection schedule, leaving it unsecured for approximately 3 hours. That's when Bianchi's people will make their move. And you'll catch them? Better." Giovanni's voice was ice cold. "We'll let them take everything. Let them think they've won. Then we track where the evidence goes, who touches it, and most importantly, how Bianchi tries to use it." Clara stared at the documents, her mind racing. This is insane. What if something goes wrong? What if they realize it's a trap? They won't. We've made everything too tempting, too perfect. Criminals are like anyone else. They see what they want to see. Giovanni met her eyes for the first time in days. Sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to become the prey. The container arrived at 11:47 p.m. on Wednesday, right on schedule. Clara watched from Giovanni's office as the massive steel box was unloaded from a cargo ship and placed in the secured inspection area. From this distance, it looked like any other container, anonymous, unremarkable. Giovanni stood beside her, phone in hand, coordinating with Marco and his security team positioned throughout the port. Hidden cameras covered every angle. Tracking devices had been sewn into the falsified documents. Even the bills of counterfeit cash had microscopic RFID chips. "Are you sure they'll take the bait tonight?" Clara asked. "Santos is scheduled for night shift. He knows about the inspection delays. If Bianchi wants this, it has to be tonight before the container goes through official customs processing tomorrow." Giovanni checked his watch. "Give them 2 hours." 2 hours turned into 3. Clara had almost given up when Marco's voice crackled through Giovanni's earpiece. Movement. East side. 2 individuals approaching the container. Giovanni pulled up the camera feed on his laptop. Clara leaned in, recognizing Santos immediately, his distinctive tattoo sleeve visible even in the dark. The second man was shorter, stockier, with a limp that reminded her painfully of Luca. They worked quickly and professionally. Lock cutters. A tablet scanning for security tags. Within minutes, they'd opened the container and disappeared inside. "They're downloading files from the hard drives," Marco reported, taking photographs of the ledgers. "They've found the cash." "Are they taking it?" Giovanni asked. "Negative. Too risky. They're just documenting everything." Marco paused. "Wait. Santos is on his phone. Can we get audio?" A technician's voice came through. "Patching through now." Static, then Santos's voice, distorted but audible. "Exactly what you said would be here. Russo's entire operation documented. This is big enough to bury him." A second voice responded, one Clara didn't recognize. Cold. Authoritative. "Photograph everything. We move tomorrow. Bianchi wants this delivered to the consortium board by Friday." "What about the Hayes situation?" "Leave it. Once Russo goes down, no one will care about one kid and his debt. We'll handle loose ends after." The call ended. Clara felt ice in her veins. "Leave it. Handle loose ends after." They were talking about Luca. About her. Giovanni's expression remained perfectly controlled, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Keep tracking them. I want to know every step between here and Bianchi's hands." Over the next 4 hours, they watched as the photographs and documents made their way through a chain of contacts. Santos to a courier. The courier to a finance office in Midtown. The office to a luxury apartment on the Upper East Side, Bianchi's private residence. Marco's team tracked every movement, every transaction, every person who touched the evidence. By dawn, they had a complete map of Bianchi's operation from the port workers all the way to the top. "He's planning to present this to the consortium on Friday," Marco confirmed. "He's scheduled an emergency session citing serious concerns about Russo Shipping's business practices." Giovanni stared at the surveillance photos of Bianchi and his apartment, holding the falsified documents like they were made of gold. The man was smiling. Triumphant. "Let him have his moment," Giovanni said quietly. "Let him feel like he's won. Let him walk into that meeting thinking he's about to destroy me." Clara looked at him. "And then?" Giovanni's smile was colder than winter. "Then I show the consortium exactly who the real criminal is. With documentation they can't dispute and evidence they can't ignore. But those documents are fake. You created them. The documents about my supposed crimes are fake. But the trail showing Bianchi's smuggling operation, his bribes, his systematic sabotage of my company, that's all very real." Giovanni closed his laptop. "I didn't just set a trap, Clara. I built a bridge that leads directly from Bianchi to every illegal act he's committed for the last 6 months. And he walked across it voluntarily." For the first time since their fight, Clara saw the full scope of Giovanni's intelligence. This wasn't just revenge. It was surgical precision. What happens to Santos? To the others? That depends on what they do next, Giovanni said. But their boss is finished. And once Bianchi falls, his entire organization collapses with him. Including, Clara realized, the debt that had trapped Luca. 2 more days, Giovanni said, looking out at the sunrise over the port. 2 more days and this ends. Clara wanted to feel relieved. Instead, she felt afraid of what Giovanni Russo could do when he set his mind to destroying someone. And grateful it wasn't her. Giovanni didn't wait for Friday's consortium meeting to make his move. Thursday morning, while Bianchi was celebrating his supposed victory, Giovanni was in a secure video conference with investors across 3 continents. Clara wasn't supposed to be there, but she'd learned Giovanni's door code by watching him enter it. She slipped into the back of his study just as the call began. "Gentlemen," Giovanni said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I'm calling in a favor." On the screen, 6 faces. Men who controlled shipping routes, port access, and freight pricing across Asia, Europe, and South America. Men who owed Giovanni Russo in ways that couldn't be written down or spoken about in polite company. Bianchi Logistics has been undercutting market rates for 18 months, Giovanni continued, pulling up financial data. He's been operating at a loss, subsidizing his shipping prices with money from illegal operations. I'm about to expose those operations. When I do, his stock will crash. I need you to make sure it crashes hard enough that he never recovers. One of the men, a gray-haired executive from Singapore, leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" "Coordinated rate adjustments. You control 60% of global freight capacity. If you simultaneously raise rates on routes that compete with Bianchi's core business while lowering them on routes that undercut his secondary markets, you'll create a price war he can't win." "That's market manipulation," another investor said carefully. "That's competitive pricing strategy," Giovanni corrected. "Perfectly legal. Just strategically timed." The men exchanged glances. Then one by one they nodded. "How long do you need?"
Singapore asked.
72 hours. Start the rate changes today. By Friday, I want Bianchi's stock in free fall. Clara watched in horror and fascination as Giovanni orchestrated a financial assault that would make military strategists jealous. Within hours, shipping rates across the Pacific spiked by 15%, except on routes that directly competed with Bianchi's most profitable contracts. Rates there dropped by 20%. Bianchi's clients started canceling contracts before lunch. Marco burst into the office at 2 p.m. with updates. "It's working." Bianchi's stock dropped 4% in the first hour of trading. His investors are getting nervous. "Not good enough," Giovanni said coldly. "Accelerate Phase 2. Phase 2 was even more devastating." Using shell companies Giovanni had established years ago, his team began simultaneously buying and dumping Bianchi's stock in carefully calculated patterns. To outside observers, it looked like major investors were losing confidence and fleeing. The stock dropped another 8%. But Giovanni wasn't done. "Release the customs reports," he ordered.
Marco hesitated.
"Boss, if we leak those now, before the consortium meeting, Bianchi thinks he's presenting evidence of my crimes tomorrow. I'm going to make sure he's too busy trying to save his company to show up." Giovanni's eyes were merciless. "Release them. Anonymously. To every financial news outlet and regulatory agency simultaneously." Within the hour, reports began surfacing about irregularities in Bianchi Logistics customs declarations. Nothing concrete enough to trigger immediate legal action. Giovanni was too smart for that, but enough to plant seeds of doubt. Enough to make investors panic. By market close, Bianchi's stock had dropped 23% in a single day. Clara watched the financial news in Giovanni's study, seeing analysts struggle to explain the sudden collapse. None of them understood they were watching a precision demolition. "How many people work for Bianchi's company?" she asked quietly. Giovanni glanced at her, surprised she was there. "About 4,000 globally. And you're destroying all of them to get to one man." "I'm destroying a criminal organization that's been poisoning legitimate business for years. The 4,000 employees can find work elsewhere. Many of them will probably work for me once this is over." He turned back to his screens. "Collateral damage is unfortunate, but it's not my priority." The coldness in his voice made Clara's stomach turn. This was the real Giovanni Russo, not the man who'd kept her sticky notes or noticed her limping. This was a predator who'd identified prey and wouldn't stop until it was dead. By Friday morning, Bianchi's empire was in ruins. His stock had crashed 47% over 2 days. 3 major investors had pulled out completely. The board had called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership changes. And most importantly, Santos and the other smugglers had vanished. They ran the moment the stock started crashing, Marco reported. Santos withdrew $30,000 in cash, wiped his apartment, and disappeared. We tracked him to a bus station in Philadelphia, then lost him. The others scattered to different cities. Let them run, Giovanni said. Without Bianchi's money, they're just low-level criminals. Not worth our time. Clara felt a surge of hope. What about Luca? If they're gone. Your brother's clear. The warehouse on South Street has been abandoned. Bianchi's too busy trying to save his company to worry about loose ends. Giovanni finally looked at her. You can see him now if you want. The relief nearly knocked her over. Really? Marco will take you. But Clara... Giovanni's voice stopped her at the door. Your brother needs real help. Medical treatment, physical therapy, probably counseling. I've arranged for him to be transferred to a private facility in Connecticut. Everything's covered. Why? The question came out broken. Why are you doing this? Giovanni was silent for a long moment. Because I told you I'd handle it. And I keep my promises. Clara left before the tears could fall, before she could thank him or hate him or feel any of the complicated emotions twisting in her chest. That afternoon, Giovanni walked into the International Shipping Consortium headquarters in Manhattan, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. Bianchi was already there, looking haggard. His confident smile had been replaced with barely concealed panic. The fake documents about Giovanni's supposed crimes sat on the table in front of him, his last desperate play. Shall we begin? The consortium chairman asked. Bianchi stood, preparing to present his evidence, to expose Giovanni as a criminal and save his crumbling empire. Giovanni just smiled and opened his briefcase. Actually, he said quietly, I think you'll want to hear my presentation first. What happened next would be talked about in shipping industry circles for years. Giovanni Russo didn't just defend himself. He annihilated his enemy with such precision that even the consortium board looked uncomfortable watching it. Clara found Luca in a hospital room overlooking the Connecticut countryside, and for the first time in months, he looked alive. Not just surviving, actually alive. His color had returned. The pain lines around his eyes had softened. Clean bandages covered his torso instead of the dirty wrappings she'd been applying in that freezing warehouse. And 4 drip fed nutrients into his arm, and monitors beeped steadily, reassuringly. He was asleep when she arrived. Clara stood in the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. A nurse appeared beside her. You must be Clara. He's been asking for you. How long has he been here? 3 days. Mr. Russo's team brought him in Monday night. He's had surgery to repair the damage from his original injuries. They'd healed incorrectly, causing chronic pain. Dr. Morrison says with physical therapy, he should make a full recovery. Clara's legs felt weak. 3 days. While she'd been watching Giovanni destroy Bianchi's empire, he'd already moved Luca to safety. Already arranged surgery. Already started fixing everything. She moved to her brother's bedside and took his hand. His eyes fluttered open. Clara? His voice was rough from disuse, but stronger than she'd heard in months. You're really here. I thought I dreamed it. I'm here, she squeezed his hand. You're safe. It's over.
The debt. Gone.
The men who hurt you are gone. Everything's over. Luca's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. God, Clara, I'm so sorry. I destroyed your life because I was stupid and greedy and... Stop, Clara's voice broke. We'll talk about all of that later. Right now, you're alive, and that's all that matters. But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. This was too perfect, too clean. Men like Santos didn't just vanish. Debts didn't just disappear. Giovanni had done something, and she needed to know what. She found him 3 hours later at the warehouse, watching cargo operations from his office window. He didn't turn around when she entered. How is he? Awake. Healing, Clara closed the door behind her. What did you do? I arranged medical care. I believe we discussed this. The smugglers, Giovanni, Santos, and the others. Where are they? He finally turned to face her. His expression was carefully neutral. They left the city when Bianchi's money dried up. Criminals rarely stick around when their funding disappears. Did you hurt them? Giovanni's eyebrow raised. Why would I need to? Financial pressure accomplished everything I needed, but Clara had spent months watching people lie. She'd gotten good at reading the spaces between words. You're not telling me something. I'm telling you everything relevant. The smugglers are gone. Your brother's debt is erased. The operation that threatened both of you has been dismantled. What else do you need to know? The truth. Her voice rose with frustration and fear. Did you kill them? Did you have Marco? I didn't kill anyone. Giovanni's voice was hard as steel. I didn't need to. I used the same tools I always use: money, leverage, information. I turned their own organization against them. I made it more profitable for Bianchi's network to abandon the smuggling operation than to continue it. Santos and his crew fled because staying was too dangerous, not because I hunted them. He moved to his desk and pulled out a folder, handing it to Clara. Inside were documents, financial transfers, employment records, asylum applications. Santos is in Philadelphia working construction under his real name. The others scattered to different cities with clean records because I made deals with them, cooperate with the investigation, testify if needed, and walk away without charges. They were low-level operators, Clara. Destroying them wouldn't accomplish anything. Clara stared at the documents, relief and confusion washing over her. You let them go. I let them choose exile over prison. They were smart enough to take the offer. Giovanni's expression softened slightly. Did you really think I'd build all of this, the legitimate business, the reputation, the empire, just to throw it away by becoming a murderer? I thought, when you destroyed Bianchi's company, when I saw how cold you were, Clara's voice trailed off. I'm ruthless, not sadistic. There's a difference. Giovanni took the folder back, setting it aside. I fight with money and strategy because violence is messy, unpredictable, and ultimately self-defeating. My father built his empire on blood and fear. It collapsed the moment he died. I built mine on contracts and leverage. It'll last. Clara sank into a chair, the emotional whiplash of the last few days finally catching up with her. Why didn't you just tell me this? Why let me think? Because you needed to learn something. Giovanni sat across from her, his dark eyes intense. You fought to save one man, Clara. Your brother. You sacrificed everything, your savings, your health, your future, for one person. And that's admirable. It's also short-sighted. What's that supposed to mean? I fought to free 100 people who owed more than you'll ever know. Clara looked up sharply. What? Giovanni pulled out another document. This one was a list, names, amounts, dates. Bianchi's smuggling operation didn't just trap your brother. Over the last 3 years, he's ensnared 47 dock workers, 32 truck drivers, 18 warehouse staff, and God knows how many others in similar schemes. Fake debts, inflated medical bills, imaginary fees. All designed to keep people desperate and compliant while he used them to move contraband. Clara's hands shook as she read the list. Some debts were higher than Luca's, some lower, but all of them represented lives destroyed, families struggling, people trapped in impossible situations. When I dismantled his organization, I didn't just save your brother. I freed everyone on this list. The fake debts are gone. The threats are gone. Most of these people don't even know yet. They'll just stop getting collection calls, stop seeing the smugglers, and slowly realize they're free. Giovanni's voice was quiet but firm. You fought with everything you had to save someone you love. I respect that. But I fight on a different scale. Clara felt tears burning her eyes again, but for a different reason now. You did this for all of them. I did it for my company first. Bianchi was bleeding me dry, destroying my reputation, threatening everything I've built. But yes, dismantling his operation freed these people. That's not charity, Clara. That's just smart business. Desperate workers make mistakes. Free workers are productive. Even now, even in this moment of revelation, Giovanni couldn't help framing it as business strategy. But Clara saw past the cold logic to the truth underneath. He'd saved 100 people because he could, because it was the right thing to do, even if he'd never admitted in those terms. I spent months thinking you were a machine, she said quietly.
Cold.
Calculating. Heartless. I am those things. No, Clara met his eyes. You're someone who does good things and refuses to take credit for them. Someone who hides behind business strategy and profit margins because admitting you care about people would make you vulnerable. Giovanni's jaw tightened. Careful, Clara. You're starting to sound like you understand me. Maybe I do, she stood, moving toward the door, then paused. Thank you. For Luca, for the others, for everything. I know you'll say it was just business, but thank you anyway. Giovanni didn't respond. He turned back to the window, watching cargo containers being loaded, and Clara left him there. But she saw the ghost of a smile on his face as she closed the door. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Clara Hayes felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The International Shipping Consortium boardroom occupied the top floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan, with views stretching from a Hudson to the East River. 14 board members sat around an oval table, representatives from the world's largest shipping companies, port authorities, and trade organizations. They'd seen corporate battles before. Hostile takeovers, price wars, bankruptcy proceedings. But none of them were prepared for what Giovanni Russo was about to do. Vincenzo Bianchi stood at the head of the table, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the bags under his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he arranged his documents, the falsified evidence from Giovanni's trap container. Gentlemen, Bianchi began, his voice carrying forced confidence. I've called this emergency session because I've discovered evidence of serious criminal activity within Russo Shipping. Evidence that threatens the integrity of this entire consortium. He activated the presentation screen, displaying photographs of the fake ledgers. These documents show systematic smuggling operations, bribery of customs officials, and falsified shipping manifests. Giovanni Russo has been using his company as a front for. Those are forgeries. Giovanni's voice cut through the room like a blade. He hadn't moved from his seat, hadn't raised his voice, but every eye turned to him. Bianchi's face flushed. Excuse me? They're forgeries. Deliberately created and planted in a container designed to lure your smuggling operation into revealing itself. Giovanni stood, moving to the presentation controls with casual authority. May I? The consortium chairman, a stern-faced woman named Margaret Chen from the Singapore Port Authority, gestured for him to proceed. Mr. Russo, you'll have your chance to respond. But Mr. Bianchi called this meeting. With fabricated evidence obtained through illegal means, Giovanni connected his own laptop to the screen. I'll save everyone time. The documents Mr. Bianchi is presenting came from a container that arrived at my port Wednesday night. A container I specifically designed to trap the smuggling ring that's been sabotaging my operations for 6 months. He pulled up surveillance footage. The screen showed Santos and another man breaking into the container, photographing documents, making phone calls. That's Derek Santos, Giovanni continued. A former employee of Bianchi Logistics who was planted in my company 7 months ago. The man with him is Michael Torres, also on Bianchi's payroll. These men have been using Russo shipping containers to move contraband while sabotaging my legitimate shipments. Bianchi's face went pale. This is a desperate fabrication. Then explain this. Giovanni pulled up financial records, real ones this time, obtained through Marco's investigation. Wire transfers from Bianchi's shell companies to Santos's accounts. Payment schedules that corresponded exactly with smuggling operations. Communications between Bianchi's logistics managers and dock workers about special cargo. The boardroom fell silent. Margaret Chen leaned forward, studying the documents with sharp eyes. Giovanni continued methodically, building his case piece by piece. He showed customs records proving Bianchi's people had been bribing inspectors, shipping manifests with altered weights and contents, photographs of contraband seized from containers bearing Russo shipping labels, but secretly loaded by Bianchi's operatives. For the past 6 months, Mr. Bianchi has been conducting a systematic campaign to destroy my company's reputation while using my infrastructure for his criminal enterprise. Giovanni's voice remained perfectly controlled, but his words carried devastating weight. He planted operatives in my workforce. He bribed port officials to flag my containers for inspection. He moved contraband using my shipping routes, then ensured I took the blame when customs found irregularities. He pulled up the stock market data from the past week. When his operation began to unravel, Mr. Bianchi attempted one final gambit, presenting forged evidence to this board in hopes of destroying me before his own crimes came to light. Unfortunately for him, I've documented everything.
Bianchi stood abruptly.
These allegations are preposterous. I demand. You demand nothing. Margaret Chen's voice was ice. Sit down, Mr. Bianchi. For the next hour, Giovanni systematically dismantled Vincenzo Bianchi's empire. He presented testimony from dock workers who'd been coerced into participating. Financial analysis proving Bianchi had been operating at a loss, subsidizing his shipping rates with smuggling profits. Even communications between Bianchi and his logistics managers discussing the Russo problem and how to accelerate his downfall. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, devastating. One board member, a German port executive, finally spoke. Mr. Bianchi, do you have any response to these allegations? Bianchi's hands shook as he gripped the table. His confident facade had completely crumbled, revealing the desperate man beneath. Giovanni, we can discuss this privately. Come to an arrangement. There is no arrangement. Giovanni's voice was merciless. You tried to destroy everything I've built. You used my company to commit crimes, threatened innocent people, and poisoned the industry we're supposed to be leading. You made this personal. Now you'll face the consequences. Margaret Chen looked around the table at the other board members. I moved to immediately suspend Bianchi Logistics from the consortium, pending a full criminal investigation. All in favor. 13 hands rose. Only Bianchi's remained down. The motion carries unanimously. Chen's expression was grim. Mr. Bianchi, your consortium membership is hereby revoked. All existing contracts with member companies are suspended. Port authorities will be notified, and relevant law enforcement agencies will receive complete documentation of these proceedings. She turned to Giovanni. Mr. Russo, on behalf of the consortium, I apologize for the harm done to your company. We will be conducting a full review of security protocols to prevent similar infiltrations in the future. Giovanni nodded once, collected his laptop, and walked out. Behind him, Vincenzo Bianchi sat alone at the table, his empire destroyed, his reputation in ruins, facing criminal charges that would likely end with prison time. By evening, the story had leaked to the financial press. But in typical shipping industry fashion, the details remained vague, corporate warfare conducted through conference rooms rather than courtrooms. The Wall Street Journal headline read, Bianchi Logistics expelled from international consortium amid smuggling allegations. Financial Times went with, Russo Shipping vindicates reputation in corporate espionage case. But it was a Bloomberg columnist who captured the real story. In what industry insiders are calling the quietest market war in history, shipping magnate Giovanni Russo systematically dismantled a rival's criminal operation using financial strategy and documentary evidence rather than legal battles or public disputes. Sources say Russo never raised his voice during the consortium hearing that ended Vincenzo Bianchi's career. Clara read the articles that night from her room at Giovanni's estate, understanding now what she'd witnessed. Not violence, not threats, just cold, calculated precision. Giovanni Russo had destroyed a man's entire empire without firing a single shot. And somehow, that was more terrifying and more impressive than any other form of victory could have been. 3 weeks later, Clara walked through the mansion's main entrance at 6 a.m., wearing her cleaning uniform and carrying a thermos of coffee. Her limp was barely noticeable now, just a slight hesitation in her left step, more habit than injury. Maria looked up from the kitchen, surprised. Clara? I thought you weren't coming back until next month. Luca's doing well. Physical therapy 3 times a week, but he's walking without assistance now. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery. Clara set down her thermos. Besides, I've been gone long enough. Mr. Russo's office probably looks like a disaster. It didn't, of course. Giovanni kept everything meticulously organized. But returning to work felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she'd lost somewhere between the warehouse meetings and the mansion imprisonment, and the slow realization that Giovanni Russo was far more complicated than she'd ever imagined. She climbed the stairs to his study, expecting to find it empty at this early hour. Instead, Giovanni sat at his desk, tie loosened, still wearing yesterday's suit. 3 empty espresso cups suggested he'd been there all night. He looked up when she entered. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, or something softer he quickly buried. You're back. I work here, remember? Clara began tidying the conference table, gathering scattered documents into neat piles. When's the last time you slept? Define sleep. More than 2 hours consecutively. Giovanni considered. Thursday? It's Monday, Mr. Russo. Clara shook her head, falling into their old rhythm with surprising ease. You need to take better care of yourself. Is that professional advice from my maid? It's common sense from someone who's watched you work yourself into the ground. She paused, meeting his eyes. You saved 100 people and destroyed a criminal empire. You're allowed to rest now. Rest is for people who've finished their work. I'm just getting started, but despite the words, Giovanni stood, stretching tension from his shoulders. The consortium wants me to lead a task force on port security reform. Apparently, my innovative approach to corporate intelligence impressed them. Clara smiled slightly. That's a very polite way of saying you scared them. I prefer to think I educated them. Giovanni moved to the window, watching the sunrise paint the Hudson River gold. Bianchi's facing 30 years for smuggling, racketeering, and bribery. His company's being liquidated. Most of his employees are finding work with competitors, including me. I've hired 47 of them so far. The ones from the list? The ones who were trapped. They deserve a second chance under better management. He glanced back at her. Your brother's been asking about job opportunities. Marco mentioned he has a philosophy degree. Clara's chest tightened. He does, but after everything. Philosophy majors make excellent logistics analysts. They're trained to think systematically, identify patterns, solve complex problems. Giovanni's tone was casual, but Clara heard the offer beneath it. There's a position open in my compliance department. Entry level, but it has growth potential. If he's interested. You're offering my brother a job? After what he did. I'm offering him a chance to rebuild his life. What he did was stupid, not malicious. People deserve opportunities to prove they've learned from their mistakes. Giovanni turned fully to face her. Besides, if I judge everyone by their worst decisions, I'd have to fire myself. The moment stretched between them, weighted with everything unsaid over the past weeks. The fights, the forced proximity, the slow realization that neither of them was quite who the other had assumed. Clara broke the silence first. Thank you. For Luca, for the job offer, for everything. You've already thanked me. Repeatedly. I know. But I never actually meant it before. I was too angry, too confused about what you were doing and why. She moved closer, her voice softer. I understand now. You weren't just helping me or destroying Bianchi. You were protecting something you built. Something that matters. Giovanni's expression was unreadable. Don't romanticize it, Clara. I'm not a hero. I'm a businessman who eliminated a threat to my interests. You're a businessman who framed a duffel bag. She'd noticed it that morning. The black bag she'd carried through the warehouse that first night, now mounted in a glass case on the wall near Giovanni's desk.
No explanation, no plaqué.
Just the bag, preserved like a museum piece. Giovanni followed her gaze, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked almost embarrassed. "It's a reminder," he said quietly. "Of what?" "That debts can't always be paid in cash." He moved to stand beside the case, his reflection ghosting over the glass. "You carried that bag like it weighed the world. You were willing to destroy yourself for someone else's mistakes. That kind of loyalty is rare. Dangerous sometimes, but rare." Clara stood next to him, studying their reflections in the glass, the elegant businessman and the maid, separated by wealth and power and 100 other things, but connected by something neither could quite name. "I spent my whole life thinking powerful people were heartless," she admitted. "That money made you cold. That success required cruelty. It often does, but you proved me wrong."
You're cruel when you need to be, yes.
"But you're also capable of extraordinary kindness. You just hide it behind strategy and business logic because admitting you care would make you vulnerable." Giovanni was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, genuinely smiled, not the cold corporate version but something real and slightly sad. "You see too much, Clara Hayes. Someone has to. You're terrible at seeing yourself clearly." They stood there in comfortable silence as dawn light filled the study. The duffel bag hung between them, a symbol of struggle and sacrifice, of debts both paid and forgiven, of two people who challenged each other's assumptions and emerged changed. "I should let you get back to work," Clara said finally. "And you should sleep. At least 4 hours. 3.
Deal."
As she turned to leave, Giovanni's voice stopped her. "Clara, I'm glad you came back." She looked over her shoulder, seeing something vulnerable in his expression. Something honest. "Me too, Mr. Russo." "Giovanni. You can call me Giovanni." Clara smiled. "Maybe someday, but not yet." She left him standing by the framed duffel bag, watching her go with an expression that suggested maybe, just maybe, Giovanni Russo had learned something too. That some debts couldn't be measured in money. And some connections couldn't be explained by logic. They simply existed, complicated, unexpected, and surprisingly strong. Like a sticky note about thunderstorms. Like a maid who'd taught a magnate about sacrifice. Like gratitude wrapped in mutual respect. 6 months after the consortium hearing, Clara stood in Giovanni's penthouse living room, watching the evening news while folding his laundered shirts. The routine had become familiar again, comfortable, even. But everything felt different now. She wasn't the desperate woman who'd limped through the warehouse gate. Luca wasn't hiding in an abandoned building, bleeding and broken. Giovanni wasn't just the cold businessman she'd once feared. They'd all become something else. Something better. The news anchor's voice cut through her thoughts. In a surprising move, Russo Shipping has announced a comprehensive healthcare initiative for all port workers across its Northeast operations. The program will provide full medical coverage, including emergency care, physical therapy, and mental health services, at no cost to employees or their families. Clara's hands stilled on the shirt she was folding. The screen showed footage of the port, workers gathered at a town hall meeting, looking stunned and grateful as Giovanni's HR director explained the benefits. One older man wiped tears from his eyes. A younger woman held her pregnant belly, relief visible on her face. Industry analysts estimate the program will cost Russo Shipping approximately $12 million annually, the anchor continued. When asked about the initiative, CEO Giovanni Russo declined to comment, stating only that healthy workers build stronger companies. The move has sparked conversations about corporate responsibility throughout the shipping industry, with several competing firms announcing plans to review their own healthcare policies. Clara heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Giovanni. She'd learned the sound of his approach, the particular way he moved through space with quiet confidence. "You did this because of me," she said softly, still watching the screen. "Because of Luca." Giovanni appeared beside her, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable as he watched his own PR initiative play out on television. "I did it because it makes business sense. Healthy employees are more productive. Fewer workplace accidents mean lower insurance premiums. It's simple economics. It's $12 million a year. It's an investment in infrastructure. But his voice lacked its usual certainty, and when Clara finally looked at him, she saw something honest in his eyes. And yes, because I watched you destroy yourself trying to pay medical bills that should never have existed. Because I saw how easily desperate people can be exploited by systems that don't care about them. Because someone needed to do something, and I had the resources to actually make a difference. Clara turned to face him fully. You're changing things. Real things. Not just winning corporate battles or eliminating threats. You're actually helping people. Don't make me into something I'm not. This is still capitalism, Clara. I'm not a saint. No, she agreed. You're just a man who learned that loyalty works both ways. That protecting your workers is protecting your empire. That sometimes the smallest limp, she gestured to her leg, now fully healed, can make the biggest city stumble, then stand taller. Giovanni's expression shifted. Surprise, recognition, something almost like pride. You've been listening to my speeches. Someone has to make sure you don't forget your own lessons. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the news shift to other stories. Outside the penthouse windows, the city stretched endlessly. Millions of lives intersecting, struggling, surviving, thriving. I'm leaving, Clara said quietly. She felt Giovanni tense beside her. Leaving the job. Leaving New York. Luca got accepted to a graduate program in Boston. Philosophy, of all things. He wants a fresh start, somewhere without memories of warehouses and debts and near-death experiences, she smiled slightly. I'm going with him. He needs family close by while he finishes healing. And your job here? Maria can handle the cleaning. You don't really need a maid anyway. You're the most organized person I've ever met. Clara finally met his eyes. But I wanted to thank you. Really thank you, not just with words but with understanding. You saved my brother's life. You saved my life, even though I didn't realize I needed saving. You changed the entire shipping industry's approach to worker welfare because you saw something broken and decided to fix it. Giovanni was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk and pulled out a familiar object, one of her sticky notes. Thunderstorms at 3 p.m. Bring the Lexus. You've been leaving these for 8 months, he said. Weather updates, meeting reminders, small observations. You cared about details that didn't matter to your job, but mattered to someone's day. That's just being considerate. That's being rare. He set down the note carefully. The healthcare initiative doesn't make me a good person, Clara. But maybe it makes me slightly less of a bad one. And I learned that from you, from watching someone give everything for someone else, even when it was irrational and self-destructive and completely, stubbornly noble. Clara felt tears burning her eyes. You're going to make me cry on my last day. Very unprofessional, Mr. Russo. Giovanni, he corrected gently. After everything, I think you've earned first-name privileges. Maybe, she smiled through the tears. But I think I like Mr. Russo. It reminds me of who I thought you were and how wrong I was. An hour later, Clara walked down the port road at sunset, a single suitcase in her hand. Her stride was steady, confident, completely free of the limp that had started everything. The evening light painted the Hudson gold and orange, and somewhere behind her, cargo ships were being loaded by workers who now had healthcare coverage, paid sick leave, and a safety net they'd never had before. She didn't look back at the warehouse where Giovanni stood on his office balcony, watching her go. But if she had, she would have seen him smiling, faintly, privately, with something that looked almost like contentment. Clara Hayes had entered his life carrying a bag full of impossible debts. She left having changed everything. And Giovanni Russo, the cold businessman who'd built an empire on logic and strategy, understood something he'd never quite grasped before. Sometimes the most valuable investments couldn't be measured in profit margins or stock prices. Sometimes they were measured in the steady, confident stride of a woman walking toward her future, finally free. Sometimes they were measured in the quiet reforms that changed thousands of lives. Sometimes they were measured in sticky notes about thunderstorms and the mutual respect between two people who challenged each other to become better. The sun set over the port, and Giovanni finally turned away, returning to his office where a framed duffel bag hung on the wall, a permanent reminder that the smallest moments could trigger the biggest changes. And that debts of gratitude, unlike financial ones, could never truly be repaid. Only honored, only remembered, only carried forward into whatever came next.